What Would Louise Say? Join us every Tuesday at 10 a.m. Mountain Time. Hosted by Reverend Martine Bernard. Explore the wisdom of Louise Hay. Brought to you by New Thought Media Network. Dive into Louise's teachings. Experience healing and empowerment. Reverend Martine shares insights. Connect with a contemporary audience. Unlock your potential. Transform your life with love. Embrace positivity and healing. Join our vibrant community. Ready to join us? Let's spread love and wisdom together. Please like, share, and subscribe. Only on New Thought Media Network, positively inspiring.
Hello, 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 my beloveds. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. And this is What Would Louise Say on the New Thought Media Network. And I am your host, Reverend Martine Bernard. I am thrilled and so excited today because I will be interviewing Dr. Reverend David Ault, who has been a New Thought megastar in our movement, having led the CSL Atlanta Church Center for over 25 years, and who also spent so much time singing with Louise Hay. And we have so much to share. He has the stories, my beloveds, and we are so excited. Welcome, welcome, Reverend David.
Thank you. I'm great. The last 9 years were as minister in Atlanta, and before that it was associate or assistant in Granada Hills, and then Mobile, Alabama. So I've migrated a little bit in this world of ministry.
And you've made a difference in so many people's lives, and now you're impacting the larger world. You are, to me, a global New Thought leader, and I'm so excited to have you with us. Yay!
Well, thank you, and just what an awesome topic to have a show for. So you're a pioneer in this particular entry point of a topic. So
thank you.
Congratulations.
I love Louise. I read You Could Heal Your Life at 19. And I just want her legacy to continue. And I'd like to just bring it back to New Thought. I want the folks who attend our centers or who are interested in coming to our centers and churches and the whole movement to know about Louise's legacy and how she was part of us, and how her book and her teachings are actually a more secularized form of the science of mind. And so it's just so important. She's changed my life for the better, and I want that to continue. So let's start at the beginning. How did you encounter Louise, her work? How did it all happen?
Oh, there's such a full spectrum story, but I will cut to the moment of actually hearing her.
Yes.
And it was all because of a friend of mine named Jerry. And I was barely in Los Angeles, I think all of 3 weeks, and I had come there for what used to be called pilot season in television, and so I was enmeshed in auditioning for pilots for new TV stuff, and I didn't know a soul, and I had found myself strolling up Melrose Avenue, and I'm not exaggerating, I literally turned a corner and ran into Jerry, who was someone that I knew back in college. And that association was built around our fundamentalist Christian background. And we took a moment to kind of place one another. And then we were both shocked that we would have this encounter in such an unusual way. And as we chit-chatted, he began to say that he was running sound for this woman, and that she was just getting started in these weekly groups, and that I might be interested. Wow. And my immediate reaction was, oh my God, he's inviting me to church. And I was like very resistant, because I had sworn off God and the church of my upbringing. And he caught wind of that really quickly, and he just laughed and he goes, "Oh my God, no, this is so different." And he wore my resistance down, and he said that if I wanted to, I could sit by him behind this big speaker, so I could kind of, get my feet wet into the entry point of this meeting. And that was it. I heard her, and I've often reminded people of how precious it is to reflect on the first moment where you ever heard something different than the way that you had been raised. That moment was just such a pivotal turn in consideration and letting go and dissolving all kinds of old paradigms. And that was it for me, sitting behind this speaker as he was running sound for her. And I thought, oh my God. And what was fascinating is that, as most people who are familiar with Louise's work know, it wasn't like heady. It was very simple. It was all about self-love and the approach to that and the necessity of that. But for me, it was brand new. I mean, it almost bordered on heresy if I was still stuck to the roots of my upbringing. And there was such a comfort to it and a familiarity to it. Like something within me always knew this, but finally it was being articulated. And by the time that evening was over, which was the hayride, I was hooked. I hooked, and Jerry could tell. And so we had a conversation that week, and he and his partner had been talking to Louise, and Louise was at that place where it was growing so fast that she wanted to have particular music that would merge with her message and not necessarily keep borrowing things. But she was like very innovative and wanted new things. And that's how Jerry invited me, because our history was in the music department, to come, and we started to collaborate and write specifically for Louise, as well as do her favorite signature song, "I Love Myself the Way I Am." And she said, "Do it a little upbeat." So we did, and that was my entry point into new thought. I mean, who gets to have that kind of a sweet entry point?
Very few people. That is magical. It's divine alignment. It's like spirit appointed you to each other. For those of us who believe in past lives, if you do, you probably had many, many lives together. For those of us who, some people don't, it's just an alignment. It was destiny.
Turning a corner on Melrose Avenue.
Wow.
And little sidebar, Jerry was eating a falafel, which I didn't know what that, and it went all over his shirt. So when I see the word falafel, I think of Mama Lulu, as we call her.
Wow, Mama Lulu. I'd like to. It's so funny because this question is coming up in me. A lot of our teaching, I'm rereading. I have my panels coming up soon. I'm rereading the first chapters of The Science of Mind.
Mm-hmm.
I was listening to a lecture, and someone said if you read the first chapter and the glossary, you'll have a mystical experience and you'll know everything that you need to know about our philosophy. So Louise, as a practitioner, because she had been in our churches and taking the classes and studying the science of mind, I feel that her focus on self-love was so innovative. It's as the first focus, because as I'm reading, of course we are created in and through and by love, and there is the infinite presence of love everywhere in the universe. But that particular focus seems like her own innovation to the teaching. Do you know, did she ever talk about that? Did she, or do you have some insight?
It was a lived experience for her, not out of pleasure and not out of just being interested. It was an investment because of her health. So her beginnings in New York City and being in the religious science church there and being a practitioner was all culminated in this particular personal diagnosis of cancer. And she was fascinated at the time, as she was in which, enveloped into her practitioner studies, and also the emergence of the ideas of the prototypes of what might be connected with particular diseases in the body, which wasn't new. But what she did is she kind of gleaned all of that and just packaged it in such a beautiful, accessible way that it brought back something very old, dusted it off, and it made it new and fresh for a lot of people to begin to look at the association of the body and the mind and the whole, holistic component of how that works together. And so having done that herself, having had the lived experience, again, it wasn't something that she was just kind of, poking around in. She took it to heart, and from that experience is what she credits to the healing. And naturally, I think any of us, if we have that pivotal experience, want to be able to share that with others. And that's kind of how that all began to blossom for her.
Oh, thank you for putting that together. Thank you for giving, because I've thought about that is such a innovative, old, like you said, nothing new under the sun, but innovative, because in all of our desire to manifest our good, desire for health and healing, desire to know the universal principles of the cosmos, there's that little seed. You gotta love yourself, love God with all your heart, all your mind, all your soul, and love thy neighbor as the self. Because you have to, and in order to love thy neighbor, we have to really be madly in love with ourselves, to love others unconditionally. So that's just been it's such a rich nugget of what she's all about.
Yeah.
And what
So those mental equivalents for her were her gateway. And what I love about when you sit back and you kind of open the lens a little bit to the saying, there's nothing new under the sun, and yet there seems to be pivotal people who bring something from the old into the new in a way that's relatable now to a whole different generation. And that's what she did with mental equivalence.
Exactly.
Because what I loved about Mama Lulu. So what I loved about Mama was that she was so clear. Even in the hay rides, she would always say, "I am not a healer."
Yes.
Because we have to be really clear about the way in which people grab on and perceive and project as if the power is outside of them. So she was, I all the years we were together, she would say, "I am not a healer. I am here to provide a space where healing can occur."
Wow.
And so not only was that spoken as an instruction, but it continued to be a living embodiment through her. And so it's great. We're all inspired by example. And with that, when you really can own it, and when I say take responsibility for it, I'm not talking about something heavy, but taking upon the responsibility to take the gift that has been given to one and then make it really clear, I didn't come up with this gift. I'm just the vehicle by which the gift is passing through. Here's your opportunity.
That's right.
Yeah.
And for those who are listening, who haven't studied the science of mind and don't know our jargon, could you explain mental equivalent from your masterful standpoint for us?
Well, again, as Louise would instruct, it's like she had this artful way of then sort of diagramming all the physical maladies that we've been able to contextually define. And she would work with those, and through her own individual work, she began to catalog the way in which the physical expression effect had a corresponding cause. And so for her, the mental equivalent is, when we talk about cause and effect, is that for every cause, there is an effect. And when you become nuanced with that and you begin to explore that, you can see that correlation. You can begin to see things, about like everything from back pain to chronic disease. And she worked with those things. And so she wasn't making them up. She was going through her file of clients
Yes.
and her own personal life. And as I always am reminding others, and as Louise did too, this is not a definitive. This is a possibility or an opening for you to begin to not focus on the malady, but to focus on something affirmative. So whether you think that this is spot on or not, that's not the point. It's a gateway. It's an invitation for you to begin to shift your thinking away from the problem and onto something that is much more elevated and healing.
Yes, and affirmative. And I can truly relate to that. I experienced last year the health opportunity of a cancer diagnosis, and reading Louise's stuff. It was around unforgiveness, with the initial heartache of a relationship with my dad, and it was rooted in childhood. And after my parents' divorce, our relationship changed dramatically. So I began to do that work. So I fly to San Diego. And I think in the opening session, the 2-day training, Dr. Patricia says, pick a card. Okay. So everybody's shuffling and our eyes are closed. And of course I pick, I now forgive everyone from the past, releasing anything that's ever harmed me. I am free. I forgive and I set myself free. And I went, okay. Okay. Because so she really got to the heart and to the root of what was happening underneath the appearance of the health opportunity. And I loved what you had to say. We're taking our attention away from the symptoms, the fear. Oh my gosh, this is happening in the body temple. And we're centering on, oh, this may have been why. And it's may, my beloveds. The universe is mysterious. Who really knows? But you set your intention on that, and then you affirm the good. So it really just shifts your consciousness from a place of fear to faith, and from discord into peace. And we all get better when we're feeling more optimistic and more peaceful. So, wow, thank you, Reverend David. Woo, the interview is going so well. So tell me a little bit about the singing and the name of the group. I know you've mentioned it, but how was that, and where did you go? And I know you have recordings probably of everything, which I don't know if they're online. Are they on YouTube or
they're on Spotify. COVID provided a lot of stopping, and I think I went through boxes and boxes of reels and things and had all of the Alliance catalog, well, pretty much all of it digitized.
Wow.
So you can find it on YouTube and on Spotify. But
so it would be called, so the group is called, so if we're
Alliance.
Alliance.
Yeah. And, like everything else, I think there are a multitude of groups called Alliance. So it's the very best of. If you put the very best of Alliance, you will find it on YouTube. But yeah, like I had mentioned, Louise had gone to Jerry because Jerry was her inaugural sound person, and had expressed to him this desire to want to have things that began to be in harmony with the message, and harmony with what was going on in the state of the world at that time, which everybody may be familiar with. It. She is credited as being the first person, or first known person, to have extended herself in her apartment in Santa Monica at the time, all the way to Plumber Park in LA, to the capacity crowds of the Hayride, which were centered around providing a healing space for people challenged by AIDS.
Oh.
And
yes,
it's funny for those of us of that era to think that it's been so long, over 40 something years, and to think that there are generations of people who never knew that, don't know of that, or don't have the nuance and the memory and the problematic nature by which that particular pandemic influenced not just the whole planet like COVID, but to a very specific group of individuals who then had to battle all of the phobia and the hatred and the displacement and the lack of love simply because of how they were born. So on top of that, you get this pandemic of a disease without any cure, and the government. And so it was heavy. It was a heavy, heavy time.
It was.
And Louise was very conscious of the heaviness of that. And she was always balancing between staying loyal to the principles of the teaching, but also being cognizant of the fact that people were pouring in. And I'm not exaggerating, pouring in. By the time the culmination of the hayride, when she was ready to transfer that off to someone else, we were over capacity, 600 to 700 people. I knew the fire marshals by name, and we would beg them because people were traveling from abroad to come to a Wednesday night hayride because of the desperation, because of the need for community. And week after week, story after story about people, getting kicked out of their families, circle, and just, having their backs turned to them, partners not being able to go to the hospital on their deathbed because of where things were. So again, heavy, heavy, heavy stuff. And it's a balancing act because,
Yes.
well, I'll just clarify this. I did a documentary on Louise during COVID by actually the wonderful documentarian who just released the award-winning Emmy-nominated piece on Pee Wee Herman.
Yeah.
So he called me and found me through some connection, and he would do these documentary shorts that would be on the New York Times op-ed and on public broadcasting. And he approached me and he says he didn't know who Louise was. He just became fascinated by this, and this was going to be his pet project during COVID. And he wasn't of the mindset, and a good cinematographer isn't negative or positive. They're trying to just give the viewer the opportunity to make up their mind. But what I said to him was, I said, look, I understand it was problematic. I understand that people were dying still, even after that. And I said, but the thing that I learned from Louise was that healing is different than curing. And what those people experienced was healing of community, healing of being touched and embraced, of sobbing in the arms of other people who were there to comfort them when their families had turned them away. And I said, did they come in hoping for a cure? We all do that. And I said, some are still alive today, but many of them aren't. And what one has to understand from being in that room and being of that era was that, in my opinion, the healing is more important than the curing. Because as you were mentioning, as the cycle of life continues, what better way to be able to disengage from this particular body and identity to be able to move through something where the weight of that self-loathing doesn't travel with you.
Precisely.
And to me, that might be hard to measure in people's minds because we get so fixated on form. And Louise knew better than that. There was something there that understood that even if her own curing, healing, wasn't possible for everybody, what was possible is for them to be able to exit this lifetime with love.
With love and with the peace that passeth all understanding. And that love and that peace is what she was offering. Mm-hmm. I remember being a little girl, and I didn't know any gay people that I know of. Who knows? In my culture, they were probably, unfortunately, very closeted. But I remember as a little girl hearing on the news that you shouldn't touch or kiss people. I just kind of remember there was a general, be careful about touching. And I remember my little when I think about, wow, when you're different, you're different. And I said, oh, well, I'm going to die because I'm not going to stop kissing and hugging my loved ones. I decided that I was like 12 or whatever age I was, because it just sounded like what we need when we're ailing. And so as a little kid, I knew I needed my mother's hugs. I need my brother to come over and want to play in my bed when I'm sick and give me comfort. So it sounded so weird that people were like pushing people aside, and there was all this fear, and the people who were going through the appearance of this diagnosis were hurting. So why was there all this
Mm-hmm.
cruelty? I just remember the cruelty, the vibration of it. It wasn't always spoken in my world, but the news, I just remember thinking and feeling, this is cruel, cruel. Why would you abandon people at their worst hour? And to know, I mean, I was a child, and so that's how I perceived it.
Right.
But to think that Louise had the courage, and was so anchored in in the principles of our teaching and philosophy, that she was a spiritual, she had spiritual dominion in that moment, and spiritual courage, and was going to live by her convictions. And I love in her movie that she always says, we weren't going to do Ain't It Awful. We weren't going to talk about
Yeah.
all the time about Ain't It Awful, Ain't It Awful. I love when she says that.
And she would say, you can pick it up on the way out the door, but it's not happening here.
Right.
And she had a very disciplinarian way about her, where and it always did, the topic wanted to go in that direction. She had this way of really kind of halting that so that it didn't get the lingering energy to affect the rest of them. And she would just remind them, here's our purpose here. Here's our purpose here.
Wow.
Tell us what you need from this purpose.
Wow.
And it was brilliant.
What conviction.
I learned so much from traveling with her.
Yes, this is what I was like, that's my question. What did and I know that's probably a book. Where do we find is this documentary available? Is it somewhere?
It is. Yeah, it's so that documentarian that I was telling you about, his name is Matt Wolf, and all you have to do is Google, and it's called not the last hayride, another hayride. It's called Another Hayride. And it's just a snapshot. And he wanted to compare pandemics. That was initially how he started to get on this. And I will tell you this. I thought he was getting a nucleus of voices from that era. Some people who I'm still in contact with, not that much, but and I had been one of these names that was given to him. And it was, again, the pandemic, so I couldn't go to sound studios, and his whole tech crew had me putting pillows and blankets all over my windows in order to do these interviews. And it went on for hours, and then you go, okay, take a break. And, and it's like 17 minutes long, but he would just keep talking, and so there's a line towards the end of that little short documentary where I say, and what developed was the understanding that healing is far more powerful than curing. There's a difference.
Yes.
And it is fascinating how everybody from the New York Times op-ed and public broadcasting and all the YouTube shorts about reviewing it, everybody walked away with that seminal thing.
Wow.
They were like, the thing that struck me the most? Like, it was the first time that they had ever heard that concept for them. And I went, there she is. She's still doing her thing. Wow. She's still doing her thing in the public eye. Yes. He's just, what an incredible eternal ripple effect.
What an eternal ripple effect through the universe, on the planet, always circling. Dr. Patricia, and I'm going to have you talk about what you learned, and we're definitely going to do that. And I have to mention, before we take a quick break, that Dr. Patricia had an 18 or 17 or 19-year-old girl who's still in high school or first year of college, who read all her books and who actually came to the training that they had in Florida, who's helping all of her high school friends through Louise's work. She was very depressed. I think she had trouble at home. She read You Could Heal Your Life, and it revolutionized her life. And she's 19. The ripple effect continues. And we're going to take a quick break. And this is What Would Louise Say on the New Thought Media Network.
What if the person you think you are is just a fraction of who you truly are? What if years of conditioning and surviving in a challenging world have left you clinging to strategies and beliefs that mask your truest nature? I'm Catherine Duca, psychotherapist and self-esteem coach, and you're listening to Who Do You Think You Are? A show that looks beneath our psychological masks and uncovers our profoundly messy, beautiful, brilliant, tender-hearted essence. Join me as we go in search of the hidden power of our true selves. I'm so glad you're here.
Please help us say thank you to our organizational sponsors, including the Hefferland Foundation, Affiliated New Thought Network, International New Thought Alliance, Science of Mind Archives and Library Foundation, Center for Spiritual Living Denver, Center for Spiritual Living Midtown, New Thought Philadelphia, Planned Happiness Institute, Summit Center for Spiritual Living, One Heart Retreats, Center for Spiritual Living on the Lake, Unity Kitchener, Unity Spiritual Center Ottawa, Om Center for Spiritual Living, Satya Center, Begin Within Ministries, Center for Spiritual Living North Jersey, Unity of Savannah, and the Center for Spiritual Living Seattle, as well as all of our individual donors. Thank you for being part of the New Thought Media Network. Please like, share, and subscribe. New Thought Media Network, positively inspiring.
What Would Louise Say? Join us every Tuesday at 10 a.m. Mountain Time. Hosted by Reverend Martine Bernard. Explore the wisdom of Louise Hay. Brought to you by New Thought Media Network. Dive into Louise's teachings. Experience healing and empowerment. Reverend Martine shares insights. Connect with a contemporary audience. Unlock your potential. Transform your life with love. Embrace positivity and healing. Join our vibrant community. Ready to join us? Let's spread love and wisdom together. Please like, share, and subscribe. Only on New Thought Media Network, positively inspiring.
Hello and welcome back, my beloveds. We are continuing a great interview with Reverend David Ault. I'm just so excited. This has been so rich, so impactful. Thank you for being with us.
My pleasure.
And let's continue. You know, we've talked so much about Louise. What did you learn? We're going to talk about Kaleidoscope, but what did you... I know this is a book, but we would love some pointers. I can't even imagine.
Well, I would say I was there pretty much at the genesis of everything that was going on with the book. And so there was Phil Donahue and then Oprah. And so I would say that my own personal work, and it's so funny that I'm getting to do this with you right now because this just happened like a month ago, but the whole thing of mirror work resurfaced.
Yes.
And how back then that was revolutionary and difficult. And you would just see people just go into apoplexy, like, I don't want to do this. And even on Phil Donahue, there's a clip where the audience is laughing because the nervousness of that and the inability to be so vulnerable is a widespread issue, right? And so and it wasn't just mirror work, it was setting the tone and then the mirror work. And so I'm sort of behind the scenes and singing and helping Jerry and her and setups and whatnot. But, eventually it comes time for your own personal participation with that. And I had grown up fundamentalist Christian, and also pursuing an acting career. And so there was all of this own internal phobia around that and being extricated from my family and yada, yada about all of the possibilities. So much of those things were never talked about. They were just locked in. And we were riding in the van somewhere, I don't know, to another gig somewhere. And she was talking to me about my own personal home life. And I said, I just feel I have resided within myself that I will just never talk about it. And she said to me, well, have you done your mirror work? And without pressuring me, she said, why don't you just lean into it? Because it was about having the conversation with the pivotal parent, which would have been my mom. And I just said, I just can't foresee that happening. And she said, why don't you start by pretending she's in the mirror and just go from there? So I did.
Oh.
And what kind of magic voodoo was she doing? Because 3 days later, the phone rang, and my mother, who was now remarried at the time, was taking an uncharacteristic, unprecedented travel trip across the United States, and they were going to come through California from Texas. And I was like, oh my God, because I kind of made a bargain with Louise that if the timing was right, I would do it.
Yes.
And I'm like, oh my God.
This is going to be in my house, in my kitchen.
What is she doing to me? And so I had only been practicing like 3 days. And then I told her, and then I said, they're actually coming here to my apartment, my little tiny apartment in LA on a stop to something else.
Yes.
And she was like, she didn't say we had an agreement, but it was like, and so I'm like practicing in the mirror, and I'm really trying to take a breath because I thought, what's going to happen the moment they pull into the apartment complex, I'm going to run out into the parking lot going, I'm gay, I'm gay, I'm gay. And but I decided that I would wait for the moment. So
yes,
I appreciated my stepdad and everything that he was able to provide for my mom after all those children. However, I didn't feel like it was a conversation that I should have with him. This needed to be directed towards my mom. And I said, if the moment presents itself in this short visit, I will. Well, lo and behold, if he didn't go to bed like at 5:30 p.m. after all that driving, it was her and I. And I remember saying, and Louise had coached me a little bit, and she said, why would someone reveal those things anyway? It's because if you truly love someone, you want them to know everything about you. We all go, yeah, but you don't understand. And I was like, yeah, but you don't understand. And I'm sure she's like, oh my God, this kid. So that's how I started. I said something, that is indicative of who I am and what I have grown to love, and is meaningful for me, is not something that I've ever shared with you. And I said, so I told her, and her response was something to the effect of, do you still believe that God is the deliverer? And I remember saying, yes, and I don't think that this is anything to be delivered from.
Oh,
And that was kind of the end of it. And she got mysteriously ill in the middle of the night, and they left the next morning. And we really didn't speak for a couple of years after that. But Louise was the one that gave me that impasse through the mirror work thing. And so it wasn't just my direct experience with her, it was observation. And again, one of the things that I just feel so extraordinarily blessed is the ability to have hung backstage or to have participated with so many named people and just observe them.
yes.
Observe the way that people project upon them. Observe the way that they are when they're on stage and when they're not off stage. I mean, all the dynamics. And the thing that I loved about Louise was that she was this sort of differential among all the other ones because of AIDS. So the enormity of people who were globbing on and grabbing at and desperate people, parents from Europe, just everywhere we went, there were just people so desperate. And I would watch her navigate all of that and kind of lead them from the desperation and away from this as the exception to the understanding of we have to love everyone where they are right now. Just there was a grace, there was a grit and a grace, because grace wasn't enough back then. You had to have some grit because it was pretty volatile in the state of the world. And so that combination and the ability to observe that shaped me and the way in which I moved forward. I became a minister because of her. She was the one who said, take classes. And I was enough of a nerd that I loved classes. And so when she said you should take classes, I started to take classes, not because I wanted to be a minister, but because I just loved the material. And again, she was an embodiment of that all the time. And I didn't have a mother like her. I didn't have a nurturer like her. And the fact that she made me feel like I was her son, but then she artfully did that for everybody. It wasn't just me. It wasn't just me. It was, it was for everybody. And I just jump decades later. She came to Atlanta after I'd moved here, and I had just officially started my nonprofit, my global nonprofit, Kaleidoscope Child Foundation. Louise, she said, tell me all about it. So there used to be a restaurant here in Atlanta called the Sundial. So we revolved around the sundial of the Atlanta skyline many, many times while she was doing a You Can Do It conference here.
Yes.
Yeah. And I told her, and she became my first angel patron. Wow. And I'll tell you, in the beginning, not knowing what I was doing in developing countries and poverty and slums and all of that kind of stuff, just, it's a whole nother story of how it evolved. But the fact that she said, I will be your first monthly pledger, was the only way that I kept it going in probably the first 18 months.
Look at these beautiful pictures, everyone. Yeah. We have the images here, and this is the website. Oh my gosh. Reverend David, could you talk about it? I mean, we could spend, I know you have a very, very heavy, busy, happily busy schedule traveling around the world. I'm going to have you back. But if you could share a little bit about Kaleidoscope and what inspired you after being, with Louise, Alliance, becoming a minister, as you told me, to many different New Thought spiritual communities around the country. I know it's a divine idea. How did it come about for you?
Again, a big unfolding, a big story. Just briefly, in fact, there's a documentary about our origin story, which will, we have our private premiere here in Atlanta in about a month.
Oh my gosh.
And then it will go on the whole festival circuit and hopefully acquisition by the streaming platforms, all in the hopes that what we do gets a larger audience and a larger awareness for hopefully an endowment.
We
But
need all that information.
yeah,
Yeah.
so in my ministerial, upbringing, thanks to Louise, I was flying. I was on the road so much in the early days of my ministry, and this was back in the day of airline magazines. Remember those? And I was reading some story in there, and it was written by this man, and he said, the most powerful mantra that you can ever say is, I'm available.
Wow.
And then the caveat to it was, look out. Because if you're sincere, your whole world will change. Having grown up in poverty, my whole escape and daydreaming was all about seeing the world. As I became a new thought musician, again, thanks to the entry road of Jerry and Alliance and Louise, I was in the grounds of the beginnings of what's now a genre of new thought music.
Aussie music.
I would travel 32 weeks out of the year.
Wow.
And there was maybe a little small, less than 10 of us. And as that began to blossom, we would call. And so I'm not exaggerating when I say I've been in hundreds and hundreds of new thought churches, unity, religious science, worldwide, thanks to that career. And because of that career and the email list that was generated in those early days, I was able to start taking people on sacred site journeys.
Oh.
And after years of that, one of them was to Cambodia, where the people who traveled with me witnessed poverty at a level, I think, that many people just are not aware of. Yeah.
Aware of.
And
that's how you got to Cambodia. I wondered how, yes.
We got to Cambodia, something happened, and I made a vow, and I said, I'm available. And I went back, and again, thanks to Louise and all of that, we began to establish structure and 501c3s and NGOs overseas. And it's 21 years now, and we serve annually 1,000 children, and we're in generations. We have some of the kids who have gone through our programs and are now come back to teach.
My goodness.
We just had a young man in India when I started there in 2016, completely illiterate. I started on the floor of a cow barn in a slum, and he just got accepted to IIT, which for the nerds out there is the most advanced technological university in the world, more so than MIT. Wow. And I just my jaw drops and I go, how is that possible? And you start to realize that everyone is a sponge and everyone is absorbing at their personal rate. All they need is access. And so, yeah.
Seed. And as I'm an immigrant girl, I was born in Haiti, so I completely, what you're doing, I'm teary-eyed because people don't understand the level of suffering when you have poverty, and you also have a poverty of spirit only because you can't read and you don't have access to information, and those around you don't. I always say I'm a privileged Haitian American. My parents were educators. I've just had access to more, and how grateful I am. But, was reminded every day of just the suffering that goes on in the developing world. And I cannot thank you again for the impact. My goodness, I would love to be there in Atlanta for the movie debut, the documentary. Do you have dates?
Well, it's a private screening, for producers and investors and people, because there's all these rules with festival submissions.
Yes.
And so it's the only time that we'll see it on the first time, and the only time we'll see it on the big screen before it goes off on like a year and a half journey of film festivals. And so everybody who's been involved or who has traveled with me over these 20 years, so many are coming into Atlanta to see it. And it was a miracle itself how it got made. And I will just share this at Louise's memorial celebration dinner. There was about 100 of us there, and her ashes were in these little blue velvet bags. In fact, I sat at the table with Patricia Crane and her husband, and we were all instructed. They didn't want to serve us. Louise wanted us to all eat at her favorite restaurant in San Diego. And so instead of taking one bag, I took two. And
Of course.
one bag of the ashes is emptied in Cambodia in the courtyard under one of the trees. And the second bag is under the tree in our little courtyard of the school that the Hay Foundation helped me complete. And her ashes are there, and Louise's picture is in the main class schoolroom. And yeah,
I'm so emotional. Oh, this has been wonderful. I have one more question, very quickly.
sure.
At this time on the planet, many people are afraid. Many people are suffering, whether it's mental, physical, emotional. The world seems to be in enormous change. What are 3 tips that you could offer our viewers or anyone who's going to stream our show in the following weeks, in the future?
I would start by saying probably to me the most integral piece and most valued piece is not everything is as it seems.
Yes.
So when we think about our teaching, the science of mind, I think all of us begin the journey of that, as did I, in a very one-dimensional understanding. It's like, how can I make this work for me? And how can I get this for me? And so it becomes very self-centric.
Yes.
And that's good, as it should be, because one needs to flesh all of that out and to kind of, I say, get to the back of the cave of the small s self before they can begin to embark upon that which is beyond that. And to those people who have taken that journey and have continued and feel like they've done this journey and what was the point because everything is just so awful, is to pause and to take a breath and go, now it's your time. Now it's your time because you're in the back of the cave and you've fleshed out all of your somebodyness. Now it's time to consider moving beyond just this singular identification of us as humans on this planet, and to see that this teaching is really not one-dimensional, it's multidimensional.
Yes.
And when we are told that God is everything, if you're struggling with that, or if we're very busy, and we all are, in making exception to that, oh, I like the fundamental principle of science of mind when everything's working. I don't like it so much, and I take issue with it when it's not. And so it's like, okay, what's it going to be? Is it going to be a luxury principle, or is it going to be a principle?
Yes.
And that requires something of us. It required something of me. And when I reflect back on my beginnings, I realized that the minister that I was just rehashing what I had been taught through the voices of other people. And it took a while, but it came where I was able to be thankful for their voices and to now move into something that was far more deep.
Yes.
And I think when you say, what would you invite them, or the 3 things, I would say, go back to the idea of beginner's mind. Go back to the idea that no thing is as it seems, that there is a meticulousness. Ernest Holmes called it a perfect patterning. And I said, if that upsets you, I said, don't deny the upset, but lean into it now and go, what is this about that is so upsetting to me? And you begin to learn paradox in a way that it's not just a word now, it's a demandment. I must be demanded by paradox to be able to not not go, oh, it's illusion, but to walk into the illusion as the presence of the one or the vehicle or the hands and feet that knows it's an illusion, but also knows that it's relatively real.
Exactly. Wow.
It's relatively real. And, then you're going to get called a lot of names. People are going to throw out the bypass card. They're going to do all these things because everybody is in pain. I recognize that there's a lot of pain out there. And yet, and this is kind of, again, if I were to go back and look at the timeline, I'd go, this was because of Louise. 2016, I'm standing on the pulpit. Yet another mass tragedy has happened. It's now another Sunday where I throw out the topic because in Atlanta, the beautiful thing was the diversity. And whatever tragedy was going on, that particular subset of people were in my congregation and I needed to address it. And so I got used to just discarding everything. And I was doing the opening mind treatment. And I mean, it was some mass shooting, something. And I'm doing the opening treatment and I kind of out of my body and it said, do you really believe that? And I was like, I don't know. And then it was, do you want to? All the while I'm still giving the treatment. And I said, yeah, more than anything. And so I would say to people, if you really do want to know the principle at a completely different depth, then say, I'm available. But say it in a way where if you're ready, then your whole world once again will change. So that wasn't just true for Cambodia. That has been a repetitive cycle, just like Louise digging her nails into my thigh, into the van when I was complaining about something. And she said, David, you must honor the entirety of your journey.
Amen. Oh, thank you, Reverend David. Thank you, everyone. Reverend David, when you have an opportunity, we're going to have you back. I would love to talk some more. There's so much richness that I received, and I know that everyone who views this, what a gift to have known Lulu so deeply. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. This is Reverend Martine and our wonderful show, What Would Louise Say, on the New Thought Media Network. Thank you, everyone.